Hello, we're here to change the screen on the Huawei Mate SE. The first thing, we're going to eject the SD SIM card holder. Then you have two screws. I believe they are a star .8 screw. And they're on the bottom next to the charging port. Very tiny screw. Next, we will remove the screen. Now, I wasn't too worried about breaking the glass because it was already broken. The screen and the LCD screen and the glass come away from the chassis. Sometimes you can get the screen out with the chassis. I've only done this one previous time, so forgive me if I'm a little slow at it. And I'm not a professional either. Some of my means were pretty crude getting this apart. The phone came on too while I was trying to get the chassis out. You'll see between the chassis and the back plate of the phone there's a little space you can get something thin into, but those two plastic tools just weren't tough enough to get down in there. Here I am able to get a very small, thin, regular screwdriver out of the crack and pry. The chassis is metal. If you pick the edge without the buttons on it, there's less chance of you damaging anything. I'm trying to turn the phone off because I'd rather not have it on while I'm trying to take it apart. There we go. Once you get one side loose, it'll come right out. There we go. Now the fingerprint sensor is attached by this fine cable here. Now if you were to take it off the back of the phone, it's taped on, and I decided not to mess with that. You have to remove some screws on the motherboard, as you'll see, to take a little cover off the connections. I dropped the screw down in the chassis. Watch this. When I go to pry this off, it goes flying. Boing. I got it though. And these just pry up. They're just pressure fittings. That's the new chassis with the new screen and LCD on it. And the glass. I'm just pointing out to myself that I need to, the things I need to remove off that chassis to stick on the new one. This is a lot simpler than trying to replace the glass and the LCD screen, which involves a lot of gluing, and the glass is pretty brittle when it doesn't have anything behind it, and pretty easy to crack. So I chose this route. The price difference on eBay was $3, so why not make it a little easier on yourself? The chassis and screen are actually from Huawei Honor 7, I believe, but they're exact same screen and chassis. I'm just disconnecting the battery and the soundboard there. And that's for the front screen, the one on the left as I'm looking at it on the screen. There's 4 screws that hold the black piece of the soundboard down. You have to release it first to be able to get the cover off the connections. The black piece holds the cover down. These screws are really fiddly. The screwdriver wasn't very magnetic, and I had a heck of a time getting them out and getting them in. You have to give it a little pressure when you're prying it up. It does have a little bit of adhesive underneath it, like a 2-sided tape. It comes out pretty easy. There's one screw holding the circuit board on that's left on there. I'm just going to go ahead and remove this ribbon cable the rest of the way. It's just another pressure fitting there on the soundboard. I'm pointing out the white wire that runs along the chassis from the soundboard to the main board. I would suggest don't even remove them from either board. You see right here, when I pull up on this, I actually break the connection off the board. Later on, off camera I was able to solder it back on and attach the wire. I think if you remove all the screws and just leave the wire attached, you'd be better off and remove both boards at the same time when you get all the screws out. Once the board is off, you have a little silver round thing that is half of it's underneath that circuit board, and it does have some adhesive underneath it as well, and it was a little more difficult to get up, but if you use a screwdriver underneath there carefully and pry, you'll be alright. There's 3 screws that run along the top of the main board, as well as 3 on the bottoms or the lower part of it, which I hadn't removed already. Sorry about the autofocus, it sure was working hard. Here's another one of the metal clips that covers one of the connections for the cameras. Now I thought I'd have to remove the cameras to get the main board out, but as you can see here, I go to pry while the connection is loose, and the whole board come out. That was easy. And underneath that board you do have a speaker though, and an ambient light sensor, and I believe that's it. These were a little difficult to get out. They have a little bit of adhesive underneath them, and I was so worried about damaging them. Now there's an open hole there, and it has a piece of rubber in it for the camera, and I pried that out first. And then I was able to get to the speaker and the little circuit board for the ambient light sensor. Looks like I didn't show all that, but they can only go in one way when you're doing reverse. Now it's time for the battery. I was so worried about distorting the battery or bending it and causing damage to it. But I found the best thing to do was just pry the chassis away from the battery, not to try to pull the battery away from the chassis. You can see here, I'm just slowly bending the chassis away from the battery. We're not going to be using it, so it's pretty brittle. Snapped right in half. I just kind of chipped away at it little by little. So I was able to get the battery off it. Works pretty good that way. But what I didn't show is the side buttons that were also on the chassis. You need to remove them. They're just held on by 2-sided tape. You will see me install them after the battery. Here I'm pulling off the protective covering for the 2-sided tape to hold the battery down. They did provide some enough adhesive on it to hold your pieces in. Here I'm sticking the ambient light sensor back in. It only goes in one way, and there are some arrows pointing upward towards the top of the phone. That's the way I put it in. Here I'm putting the speaker in. You can put that in either way. Here I am putting the side buttons on. You can tell there's a little perforation in the chassis where it goes and where the tape goes over the edge, which also has some connections on it, and there's a perforation in there for it to sit. It was a little tight, had to use the screwdriver to kind of push it down into that perforation. When I was removing it from the chassis, I was so worried I was going to tear it, but you just have to work at it really slowly and easy, one side at a time, keeps going back and forth, and eventually it came out. Putting the main board back in. There's some alignment pins, plastic alignment pins that come off the chassis, which that sits on. It just didn't feel right when I was putting it on the first time, but I was making sure that that speaker would be fine any way you put it in, because it hits that circuit board on the back panel. I drop some screws here quite often. Makes for some boring video. Sorry about that. As you will see. You know what it's like to be watching somebody when they're working on something and you get a little agitated because you know in your head you could probably do it better. That's probably what you're feeling right now. And I would not blame you. I probably should have drank a few beers before I did it. Yeah, but I would have had to pause the video to go to the bathroom 20 times. I had to remove this screw because I forgot one of the clips goes in that hole. You dropping screws again. And again. started pushing on it, I thought I cracked the screen. It was just the noise of the chassis. Now we're putting a soundboard assembly back together the way we took it apart. Just reverse sequence. Put your little round silver thing. I don't know if it's a speaker or a battery. Those are the connections that hit the back of the circuit board once you put it in. These also have some plastic alignment pins on the chassis for the circuit board to line up. And also at the very edge, there's some plastic pieces that the circuit board fits in between these little perforations, and it took me a while to get it in there just right. All in all, it wasn't too difficult. I was just taking my time to make sure I did it right. It's my son's phone, and I really don't want to buy him another one. I use the pick here to push this white wire back into the chassis grooves. Let's hope I don't drop any more screws. Right there, I'm pointing out the grooves where the circuit board sits into. Here I'm putting the ribbon cable back on. I just use light pressure to push those in. You gotta kind of feel when they slide into the correct spot. I decided just to go ahead and connect all the cables. There at the bottom I installed the black piece of the soundboard. If you see, I didn't put the clip on first, and later on I have to remove it to install it again. Here I am putting the clips over the battery connection and the soundboard connection. There's two screws that hold it down, and it sits in there a certain way. You'll be able to tell when you're putting it on. I didn't put the one over the screen's ribbon cable because you have to hook up the fingerprint sensor first. There, I had to remove a screw to get that clip in. Here I realized I forgot the bottom clip. I'm installing it first, then the black piece, and the screw will go through both of them and hold it down. The reason I'm showing this without speeding up me putting the screws in and stuff, I just wanted to give a better view and try to give you as much information as I could installing this phone. I don't know how many times I watch videos and there's so many spots they skip over and you're hesitant about doing it because you just don't have the information, and then things end up getting broke. Like me breaking that connection for the wire. I figure if you get tired of watching me put screws in, you can hit the fast forward button. Here I am attaching the wire to the resoldered connection. Now hooking up the fingerprint sensor. And I installed the clip over those two wires, that last clip, before I assembled it. Here you can hit the buttons on the side and turn it on to make sure it works for you. Put it all back together. And it started to turn on. The speaker fell out, so I had to throw that back in there. Now you get it lined up right and just gently press around the phone, snapping it back, the chassis back into the back cover. I had one corner that gave me some difficulty. Like, you're so worried about breaking the glass as you're pressing it in there, but I had to give it the beans there to really get it in there. There, we got it. And the other corner was also giving me some trouble. It finally went in. And it's my son's phone, and he has a code on it.
After entering the code, the phone works. Please give me a like if you like this video. Thank you.